Okay, well, we are in the midst of Daniel, and we move from the first 6 chapters, really, which are a little more historical accounts, into chapter 7 and beyond, which are a part of his visions. Excuse me. We will also jump back to chapter 5 because Daniel here is showing us that he has no regard for chronological history, because 7 and 8 actually take place and provide background for chapter 5. But if you read them, by now, you know that there is way more in these 3 chapters than I could possibly cover in a short little video clip. So I'm not going to try to delve into everything. I want to give you some overarching ideas on how you might approach them, and leave you with that today. There are some great things in here, and one of the things I have found, if you can't figure everything out, don't worry about it. Scholars have tried for centuries and still can't agree on what everything means. So, Daniel 7 and 8, we get this vision here, and in this vision, what we really come down to is this age-old battle between the power of God and the power of evil. It really helps us to understand as we read through chapter 7 and then chapter 8 with the 3 characters, the horn, the ram, and the goat, which really is another picture of the same thing in many respects. But what we have here is this sense of, in the midst of this universal chaos, God lets us know that He is in charge. So really, as you read chapter 7, what you're looking for is, this gives me kind of an overall picture in its totality of all of history and the age-old conflict that goes on. Because what we see in here, number one, I'll just tell you some of what some commentators have thought of when you look at this chapter. You've got the 4 beasts. Most would say they've got to represent some empires in the world. The lion, many consider to be Babylon. The bear, many consider to be Medo-Persia or Iran, that area. The leopard, we would think of Greece. Many think of Alexander the Great. The 4th beast, not quite so sure, although many would think of Rome. Be that as it may, scholars will disagree on that. The Ancient of Days refers to God, of course, and then we go into this whole scenario and this whole vision, and we say, okay, so what does this all mean? Well, number one, let me give you 4 things that we can point to in its generality here, and then you could read it again and maybe say, oh, okay. Number one is, it is about the age-long conflict. It's not limited to a century or to a specific war, but it's this age-old conflict between these 2 kingdoms, between the kingdom of light, of God, and the kingdom of darkness, of Satan. So it's an overarching battle. Number 2, I would say that what we get is a picture here from Daniel of, number 1, the throne of God, His throne room, and we get this marvelous picture. And we also get in here the ultimate destruction of the beast, the evil. And that's not a significant, that's not, what do I want to say? That's not a specific time. Think of it more in terms of a total battle, that God has won the victory. And that leads us into the 3rd point, which is, though God has won the victory, though this destruction has occurred, evil, these beasts, are still represented by kingdoms and peoples in this world down through time, for a time being, ultimately. So there will be some suffering, there will be some struggle and strife. And then finally, probably the best way to look at this is not in a chronological sense as bang, 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 but look at all 3 of these as aspects of evil down through time. It's not necessarily one kingdom, but these are all attributes of evil as it rears its ugly head in empires down through the ages. If we approach it that way, then we can kind of start to make some sense in terms of what God is giving Daniel a picture of here. It's really about, this is the story, this is what I'm doing, this is what's happening, and then you can dig into all the minutiae and the details and try to piece together, well, what do the 10 horns mean? What are the 3 that are gotten rid of and plucked away? What are all those 4 beasts? And what is that little horn? Some have attributed that to one of the Roman kings, others to others down through the centuries. Some scholars say this was actually written and depicted in the 2nd century BC, some several hundred years later than what we would interpret it as. There are all sorts of ways to look at it, but the reality is it gives us a clear picture of the evil that is still existing in the world, the remnants of it, that ultimately already has been defeated, but the final reality of that defeat and that victory is not yet here yet. So God gives us this sense of, yeah, that's the battle, this is what I've done, this is what it looks like, and yes, for a time you're still going to struggle with it, but nonetheless, I have won the victory. Now the interesting thing is, in this we see a portion of this, these chapters here where Daniel says, okay, I know all that, but Daniel then goes on wanting to know, well, what specifically are these beasts, and what's with the 10 horns, and what's with the little horn? And it's funny how, in that sense, Daniel's really human like us. Yes, we know Christ is victorious. We know the victory is ours ultimately, but we also know that we still live in a daily struggle, and we want to know the outcome. We want to know how to get there, and we'd rather not go through the struggle, and God certainly understands that. Now, the other thing I would say about chapter 5, as we jump, now we jump back a couple chapters, but actually we kind of go to the next sequence of events. We have this strange queen that appears, and in the vision, what I think is really interesting is two things. Number one, it talks about the reign of Belshazzar, though Belshazzar is never really listed in the line of kings of Babylon. We do get one reference here to Belshazzar, to Nebuchadnezzar being the father of Belshazzar. Represents everything in this world and what it's about. Belshazzar is very much someone we could equate with the rich young ruler in Jesus' day that Jesus confronts. So we have that picture. But then we have this queen who talks about Daniel and says the Spirit of the Lord is on him. And I think that's interesting, because what does that mean? We've seen that in other places in Scripture. Well, one thing we know about Daniel is he is a man who trusts God. He is a man of integrity. He's a man who is very courageous. He is a man who displays a lifestyle that others want to emulate and know. It's clear that God seems to certainly dwell in him and guide him and direct him, because he lives it every day. And so we get that picture about him. And we know too that as Christ has promised, his Spirit dwells in us. Therefore, unlike Belshazzar, whom we're wondering who's his father, and it's the father of the powers of this world, it's probably Nebuchadnezzar, but we aren't sure. We know who our Father is. And in the midst of everything else, like Daniel, we can call upon God and say, Father, thank you for loving me and caring for me. And with our Father's Spirit dwelling in us, we then live out our days in the midst of all the confusion and chaos of these beasts roaming the earth, and the after effects of evil that still exist in this world. We live, though, in the light and presence of Christ, and therefore we ought to look and be different as we go through our lives. And so while the picture is interesting here, and it's great fun to dig into the details, let's not forget the overarching truth of what's being said here, and let's make sure that we always remember that we know who our Father is. He is the one who is victorious, and we give thanks and praise to him each and every day. So we could go into a lot of details about all of this, but I will leave you with that, and hope as you read that you find that helps you get a better picture of it. If you're someone who really likes to dig into the details, enjoy. There are many commentaries out there, a lot of stuff online you can go to and have fun arguing back and forth with scholars about what each of these things mean. But they're really to give us an overall sensual picture of God's presence and his plan in this world. So with that, I will leave you, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.